all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with me, Ellie Costello. Thank you so much for your company. We've got a jam-packed show for you today, so here's what's coming up. As Hamas released 24 hostages and another 14 are set to be released today, a glimmer of hope in the violence of the Middle East. But can the ceasefire hold, and can those still trapped inside Gaza make it home? As net migration figures hit a record 745,000, is Rishi Sunak facing a revolt from inside his own party for failing to control and reduce migration? Plus, Meghan Markle and the Princess of Wales weren't even on speaking terms as they sat in silence on the way to the Fab Four's walkabout after the Queen's death at Windsor. That and more explosive claims in Omid Scobie's new book. But how much is fact and how much is fiction? And another huge story is Oscar Pistorius is granted parole to be released in January. Today is International Violence Against Women's Day, and I'll be asking, is redemption for such terrible acts ever possible? And could you ever forgive a person who killed a family member? Do let us know today, gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, let's get your news update with Sophia.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Israel's prison service is preparing to release 42 Palestinian prisoners in the second phase of a hostage deal. Egypt has received a list from Palestinian militant group Hamas of 14 hostages to be released on Saturday, security sources said. Earlier on Saturday, Israel also said it has received a list of hostages to be freed from Gaza on Saturday by Hamas. It comes as more hostages could be released by Hamas today after 24, including women and children, were freed from Gaza. Israeli hostages travelling by helicopter landed at the Schneider Children's Medical Center in Israel. After medical treatment, hostages were reunited with family members, according to the IDF. These pictures show the hostages being transferred in Red Cross cars via the Rafah crossing. Those released included 13 Israelis, some of whom are dual nationals, 10 Thai citizens and a Filipino national. Qatar's foreign ministry says 39 Palestinian women and children have also been released from Israeli prisons as part of the deal. Psychiatrist at the Shavalta Mental Health Centre in Israel, Yuval Bloch, has been speaking at a press conference. He addressed the trauma of post-captivity.
This is way beyond what you usually think of trauma, and with 30 years of experience, I've treated quite a bit of trauma patients. I think we should ask if this is the only disorder we're going to see, and if it's only the children, the Israeli children in the combat zone. We know now for certain that this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Palestinians who fled the conflict between Israel and Hamas have started to return home as fighting pauses in the enclave. The temporary ceasefire took effect on Friday and is expected to continue until Monday. Meanwhile, trucks loaded with humanitarian aid supplies are passing through the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt by convoy. Egypt estimates that 200 trucks will enter Gaza daily during the 4-day truce. Meanwhile, the Met Police is set to clarify what type of language might break the law when chanted or displayed at pro-Palestinian marches. Tens of thousands of protesters are expected to gather in London today, calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The force will hand out leaflets at the march warning against using words and images likely to land you in jail. Around 1,500 officers will be deployed for the protests, which come amid a temporary truce in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Organisers say at least 100,000 people could turn out for the protest. Russia has hit Kyiv with its biggest drone attack of the conflict so far, according to Ukraine's Air Force. At least 5 people were injured after Shahed drones descended on the capital overnight. Explosions were heard as the aircrafts were intercepted, with buildings damaged across multiple districts. President Volodymyr Zelensky described the strikes as an act of willful terror. The former Minneapolis police officer convicted of the death of George Floyd has been stabbed in prison while serving his sentence. That's according to US media. 47-year-old Derek Chauvin was reportedly stabbed by another inmate in an Arizona prison on Friday and seriously injured. The reported incident comes days after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal, where he argued he had not received a fair trial. Mr. Chauvin is serving multiple sentences for George Floyd's death in 2020, which triggered widespread protests against police brutality and racism. The first frost has bitten the UK as temperatures fell well below freezing across large parts of the country overnight. The Met Office says the cold spell could also see snowfall next week. Tonight is expected to be the coldest night of the season across the country, with those first sub-zero temperatures. And they could possibly reach -7 Celsius across northwestern England and in the south and -4 in rural areas of Wales by tomorrow morning. London's traditional Christmas tree has been chosen and it's standing at an impressive 62 feet tall. Norway's customary Christmas gift has been felled ahead of its trip to the capital. It grew in Nordmarka, the forest just north of Oslo, and will be loaded onto a ship bound for British shores. The tree will arrive in central London this week, with the festive lights switching on in December the 7th. The Norwegian spruce is sent each year as a token of thanks for Britain's support during the Second World War. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Ellie.
Thanks, Sophia. You're watching Saturday Morning Live. Now, after yesterday's glimmer of hope, Israeli security officials have said more hostages could be released today, perhaps up to 14, during a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas. Well, this comes as the first 24 hostages were set free yesterday in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, including women and children, who in the past hour, Israel have said they're preparing to release 42 of in the second phase of the hostage deal. Benjamin Netanyahu's office have said they are reviewing a list of captives that could be freed over the next 24 hours in return for the safe release of more hostages. Well, joining me now is Israeli diplomat Alon Pinkas. Very good morning to you, Alon. I wanted to ask you first about those 13 Israeli hostages that were released yesterday. We've seen pictures and moving images of them this morning. What do we know about their condition, mentally and physically, after 7 weeks in captivity?
Well, good morning, Ali. I don't know about the mental state. I can only imagine that they've been traumatized. And as psychologists, unlike me, would tell you, that takes time to ascertain, and that takes time to diagnose the levels of trauma and you know, the residual experiences. Physically, my understanding is that they are all okay. There have been some elderly women who required medication, but that's the extent of what I know about this batch, at least. We are expecting the release of an additional 13 throughout Saturday, that is.
Yes, we are expecting a further, we hope, 14 today, all being well. I wanted to ask you, of course, this is part of a deal, those hostages for Palestinian prisoners. What do we know about those women and children who've been released from Palestinian jails? What were they being held for? What were they convicted of? And there were some there that were still awaiting trial, weren't they?
Yeah, well, correct. Some have been awaiting, some have been charged and not tried yet, certainly not convicted. They were mostly, by and large, they are accused of being part of terror cells, incitement, arms smuggling, participation in terror attacks, and so on and so forth. These are not, at this point at least, these are not big-time terrorists that have been released.
And when you see these prisoners being released, of course, it's a very delicate situation. Israel's focus is the safe return of those hostages. But in the sense of the principle of negotiating with terrorists, Western governments have opposed that for a very, very long time. But do you feel as though a deal has been done here with terrorists? And do you fear about that creation of more problems down the line?
Well, you know, we've always maintained that we will never negotiate with terrorists. And at the same time, we've always negotiated with terrorists. So this is not the first time. So by no means, Ali, is this a precedent. Not only that, but I expect further deals. Well, forget me, President Biden, speaking last night at a press conference, has said he expects further deals in the upcoming days. So these deals, whether they're mediated by Qatar or mediated by the U.S. or a combination thereof, the Red Cross, the UN, Qatar, the U.S., et cetera, we are effectively negotiating with terrorists. So I would dispense with this very lofty principle of we'll never negotiate with terrorists. We are, in fact, negotiating with terrorists.
And we're talking about 50 hostages being released in this 4-day temporary ceasefire, but that does leave a further 190 around that figure left inside Gaza. Of course, a very, very delicate situation. How do you think those 190 people remaining inside Gaza, how do you think they will eventually be released? Will we see a series of these temporary ceasefires?
Well, exactly. You just hit the nail. A series of ceasefires. Let's take what President Biden said last night in Nantucket during his Thanksgiving vacation. He said that he expects dozens to be freed, dozens of hostages, that is, to be freed in the next couple of days. Now, in the next few days. Now, that insinuates that there are further negotiations going on. These negotiations cannot be completed, cannot be conducted, certainly not completed, without further ceasefires. So we're, as you just precisely noted, we're looking at a series of ceasefires that in between could have, local flare-ups in Gaza, but certainly not the resumption of the war the way we saw it in the last few days. So I think the Americans are politely and elegantly changing the contours of the conflict. No longer the war that we saw and we were accustomed to until a few days ago, but rather a successive series of ceasefires. Now, as for your first point about the other hostages, we need to divide them, Ali, into two groups. The civilians, non-combatants, which I think will be part of that ongoing series of exchanges. But then there are the soldiers. There are several dozens of soldiers who've been taken hostage, and I think Hamas, I know for a fact that Hamas will keep them as a very last asset to negotiate. There could come a point where Israel will be reluctant to pay the price that Hamas may be will be asking probably, i.e. the release of thousands. And some of these soldiers may have to be extracted via military operations, which are obviously risky for both those coming out to rescue them and for those being held hostage. So we're looking at a very volatile situation in the next few weeks.
A volatile situation indeed. Alan Pinkers, really good to have you on the programme this morning. Thank you so much for your analysis on what is a very, very delicate situation. Thank you very much indeed. We are expecting a further 14 hostages to be released today, all being well, in exchange for 42 Palestinian prisoners. So, of course, we'll keep you updated on Saturday Morning Live with that. Now it's time to look through the top stories of today, and I'm delighted to be joined by MP for Shipley, Philip Davies, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and the broadcaster and journalist Mike Parrow. This is a packed sofa. I'm very happy to see you all this morning. Thank you very much for your company. And this one's caught my eye, and I think it's caught your eye as well, Phil and Nigel, but Mike, of course, jump in on this as well. Yeah. Boris Johnson and his 2 pennies worth on how to cut immigration after those record net migration figures out this week. What do you make of this, Phil?
Yeah, this has infuriated me, to be honest, Ellie. This has absolutely got me going this morning. Because, I voted for Boris to be leader, and he got elected as a Conservative, but unfortunately governed like a socialist. And there's no better example of this than on immigration, where the figures that we've just seen over the last few days, 742,000 in the year up to June 2022, when Boris was Prime Minister for the whole of that year, 670,000 in the year up to June 2023, when for much of it Boris was Prime Minister. And now he's got the nerve to go banging on here about how to cut immigration. I mean, if only he'd been Prime Minister with an 80-seat majority, just imagine what this man could have done. He's presided over this free-for-all on immigration, and now he's got the nerve. Do they call it gaslighting? I don't know what they call it. But anyway, all I know is that it's infuriated me that the man who's been responsible for this free and open policy on immigration has got the nerve to write a full-page article in the Mail about how we should cut immigration and that we should get stuck into, you know, all the people who are skiving on benefits and won't take jobs that we're getting people in to do. And he was one of the people who stopped all the conditionality that we had on people who were unemployed to make sure that they were actually not able to work. And he scrapped all of that during the COVID lockdowns. So it's really infuriated me this morning.
To be fair to Boris Johnson, though, he does have a right to write a full-page article on this, because you could argue he's the only man with a mandate. I mean, he argued to... he was voted
Phil,
in to do just
his
this.
article infuriated me, but for different reasons.
OK.
So I think I think that his solution to immigration is you put up the limit that people can come here on. So at the moment it's 26,500. Boris says no one should be able to come here if they can't earn 40,000. And it's nonsense. I mean, the whole thing about immigration is that you shouldn't have a cap. You should make it totally flexible, and it's about the needs of the British economy. So, for instance, a lot of this is driven by the 1 in 10 vacancies in care homes. We desperately need care workers. We want to get them from abroad. The idea that we're going to pay care workers £40,000 rather than just below minimum wage is ludicrous, so you won't get them. So, at the moment, the solutions they're coming up with just make a problem worse. Yes, we ought to try and get immigration down. down. But let's do it in a sensible way. Change the point system, for instance. At the moment, you need 70 points to come here, so that would be 10 points for speaking English, 20 points for a PhD, 20 points for a firm job offer, another 10 points for a PhD.
Stop dependence.
Well, then again, if you stop dependence, you're not going to get some of the people you want. If
you just get different people who don't have dependence.
Well, you want to get the right people for the right jobs. So in the event that somebody wants a long-term job in, say, a care home, and they've got a family, then they should be able to bring the family with them. But they pay for that on the basis that they've got to show that they can live here without claiming benefits. They pay an NHS surcharge of over £1,000 to access the health service. So there's no reason why you can't have those people there. All I'm saying is that rather, let's try and make it as flexible as possible, so when we have a need for someone, then we can bring them in.
Mike, how do you think we cut these numbers?
Well, look, to pick up on Phil's point, it seems to me that as soon as a government minister or prime minister loses office, they then go into print with the solution to the problems they weren't able to deal with. Suella Braverman last week telling us how to solve everything, but she was Home Secretary, 10 days ago, and now Boris is saying... What I get from this is that the blob would always get in the way of their plans. You see what I mean? They'd say that, wouldn't they, Phil? They'd say that when I was in office, it was impossible. My backbenchers weren't with me. The blob, the civil service weren't with me. So I can talk about it now because I know I possibly can't get it through. And to pick up on Nigel's point about not having caps, I think you'll find that in Europe now, there is a decided movement towards having caps for immigration. We've just seen what's happening in Holland, a huge swing to the right. One of the things that the new leader of Holland, far-right guy, is saying is that we're going to pull out of the EU, we're going to put huge caps on immigration. If you look at the immigration figures in Holland, they're horrendous. They're a much, much smaller country than us, but I think they took about half the people we took last year, and the country's about 1/4 the size of the United Kingdom. So my point is it's something that's got to be addressed, and you've got to take everything off the table now and go back to how many people do you want in your country? Because it's causing civil and social unrest, as we've seen in Dublin. And where will this spread to? And we're going to be talking about this a little bit later on in the programme, Mike, that move to the right that we're seeing not only in Europe but around the world. So we'll be touching on that. We've only got about a minute left before we've got to go to a break. The next general election, what do you think it will be won on? Do you think it will be the economy, or do you think it will be migration?
Both. I think both. We've got to sort both out. Jeremy Hunt started cutting taxes in the autumn statement. He needs to go much further in the budget. I mean, that won't move the dial. He's got to go much further, particularly on people's personal allowances. But we've got to get immigration down, legal and illegal. I mean, there's no route to success for the Conservatives at the next election without sorting out the problems of immigration.
I agree with that, Phil, both. But I would say that whilst the economy is something everybody talks about, nobody is prepared to speak up about immigration for fear of being called racist. And I think its silent majority will make a very big mark on the election on that issue.
Immigration comes lower down than cutting NHS waiting lists, and top of the list is cost of living. That's the big thing for the election.
Yeah, but I don't think that's true, you see. I think people just don't speak about it. And it's a very much north-south thing, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Well, let us know what you think at home. You've heard from the sofa there. What do you think? What do you think the next general election will be won on? Will it be the economy? Will it be migration? Will it be something else? Do let us know. gbnews@gbnews.com. Thank you, Nigel, Mike and Phil. Very good to see you all. Stay with me. Don't go anywhere. We've got lots more to come on the show, including, as we were saying, record-breaking net migration figures have been hitting the headlines this week, and now the Tory party could be in turmoil. We'll be asking, what is the answer to cutting those net migration figures? You're with me, Ellie Costello, on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist. And you survived? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three. Oh! No, thank you.
CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live. The time is 25 minutes past 10. Now, Tory MPs are demanding action from ministers to bring down net migration. It's after eye-watering ONS figures released this week estimated that net migration stood at 745,000 in the year to June. Well, the New Conservatives, a group of around 25 Tory MPs who entered Parliament after 2017, say it's do or die for the Tory party. Well, Phil Davies joins me now in the studio alongside journalist and author Julie Cook. Very good to see you both this morning. And Julie, let's start with you because you've got a really interesting take on this because your husband is Romanian, isn't he?
That's right, yes. So my husband is a Romanian national, but we met abroad. So initially, before the EU accession of Romania, he couldn't come here. So we lived in Italy for 7 years. We then came back here, and he, as a Romanian national, has worked here, contributed to the society, paid his taxes. And so his example and our example is, I think, a positive story of immigration. However, the recent figures are, of course, shocking, I mean, to anybody. But I think immigration can only work if it works for the country and the migrant. So, I mean, I think the migrant has to bring something to the table for the country to benefit. And I think in my case, that's happened.
So for you, you would say if somebody is willing to come here, they're willing to work, to pay their taxes, to contribute to society, that's a positive thing for this country.
Yes, I think, you know, as we've seen many times, should we have a point system? Should we have a threshold of finances or whatever? I agree more with a point system, in that if you can bring something to the table, if you have, as we've heard before, a PhD or a degree or something to bring into the NHS, or you're a doctor, or something to benefit the country rather than to take from the country, of course. But then, you know, when we went, we were very young and we couldn't be together, so I moved over there to Italy. But since he's come here, as I say, he's really assimilated, and I think that's another important point, is I'm not saying we all have to be the same and forget where we come from and forget our religions and our cultures, but one of the main points of a successful migration, I think, is assimilation, is learning the language, is learning the idioms and the history and all of that. And I think that's where some people don't succeed.
And what do you make of that, Phil?
Yeah, I think Julie makes some good points. I mean, I don't think anybody's arguing that we should have no immigration into the country at all. I mean, we need immigration. We want to bring in the best people from around the world to contribute to the country. But it's a numbers game. I mean, it really is a numbers game. We literally can't cope with the numbers that we've got coming into the country. We can't house them, for one thing. I mean, there's simply not enough houses. We can't build houses at that rate in order to accommodate all of these people, just on a practical level, irrespective of the pressure it puts on the health service, the schools, and all the rest of it. I think Julie's point about integration is a really important one as well. Integration is absolutely key to any kind of successful immigration, and that is patchy. It is mixed in different areas, and we must insist on better integration. But the thing is, we cannot cope with the numbers that we've got coming into the country at the moment. And we see in other countries what happens when immigration gets out of control. People give up on mainstream politicians and say, we're going to need some drastic action and we'll elect whoever we need to sort this out. And so mainstream politicians ignore this issue at their peril, because if they don't address this issue, I assure you somebody else will come along who will, and they might not necessarily be the kind of person that you would necessarily want in charge.
So let's touch on that point of integration. Whose responsibility is that? Is that the migrant coming here to this country? Is it important for them to learn the language, to engross themselves in the wider community, or is there something that we should be doing in order to ensure that if we are allowing a total number into this country, that we are welcoming them with open arms and giving them everything they need? Who would you say that responsibility falls on, Julie?
I think it's a bit of both, but ultimately it must lie with the migrant. I think I wouldn't go to another country and expect to get by. For example, I lived in Italy for 7 years and I had to learn the language. I had to use their equivalent of the NHS back then. I learned the language. I didn't expect to be interpreted for or anything like that. And I think when you go to another country, you should do that. You should make those steps. And I think that's why learning a language, becoming not your own culture in a bubble, as we've seen in lots of towns and cities, but integrating with everybody. And then you don't get these social divides. And I think that's what the trouble is. Of course, in the recent year, in these statistics we've seen, where we've seen mass migration on an epic scale, that's why that's why we're seeing unrest, I think, because usually it's a sort of drip. We have a net migration where as many people leave and as many come in, but that's not happening at the moment. And I think that's why we're seeing the unrest that we will now start to see.
I think Julie's right about the integration. Of course, it's got to be on the person coming into the country. The onus has got to be on you to integrate into the country that you're moving into. But I think we've got to make sure that our public bodies force people to integrate. I mean, I have this argument with Bradford Council, which is my local authority, about not translating everything into Lord knows how many different languages. Everything should just be in English. I mean, my dad was the former elected mayor of Doncaster. He scrapped the translation service in Doncaster Council and made sure that everything was just produced in English. I think you've got to ensure that people integrate as well as hope they do.
The New Conservatives, that's a group of around 25 Tory MPs who entered Parliament after 2017, they've said that this is do or die for the Tory party. Is that the sense that you're getting when you go around on the doorsteps in your constituency, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, lots of people who voted Conservative in 2019 and are now not voting Conservative, the first thing they'll mention is immigration.
Really?
Illegal and legal. It's both of them are equally important, and there's no route to success for the Conservatives at the next election without getting the immigration sorted out, both legal and also the boats coming across the channel. It really is that important. It is for Conservative voters the most important issue for us to sort out.
And Julie, I mean, we've been talking about the gaps in the care sector, the gaps in the NHS. We do need a certain level, don't we, of migration in order to plug those gaps.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I read statistics recently, whether they're right or wrong, that 42% of our NHS is people who are not from this country originally. So I think that says it all. Unfortunately, I think what happened after Brexit is a lot of EU nationals who were here began to feel unwanted, perhaps, or worried about their stay, left, and that has left a big gap in those jobs that were previously done by them, and we've now got migration from other countries. But then let's not forget we've had Ukraine, we've had Hong Kong, we've had all these different other people coming in the last sort of year or two. So that might be what the spike is, and we'll have to see.
Yeah, and really, really important to note that, actually, because a significant number here are Ukrainians who have obviously come across on that legal scheme, the Houses for Ukraine, and Hong Kong, as well as Afghanistan as well. As that is really, really important to note. But it is going to be a huge issue at the next general election. Do you feel as though any party here has got this cracked, Julie, or do you think this is going to rumble on for years to come?
No, I don't think anyone has it cracked. And I still don't see why we can't stop boats. I know that seems a naive thing to say, perhaps, but I don't understand why everybody says we're going to stop the boats and they can't. I think what annoys me as someone who has married a migrant is he did it the right way. He did the application, did all the usual things and waited until you could his country had got into the EU. And I don't understand why people are fleeing awful situations, I know, and you can't wait. But there has to be a process. There has to be a fair process for everybody, because there are also tens of thousands of people who are trying to do this the right way, who could bring something to the country, who can't get in yet.
Phil, just briefly, we don't have that much longer with you, but do you think that the small boats and stopping the boats, do you think that has been a distraction? Because you look at these figures here, and it appears that this is the much bigger issue, and we've been focusing perhaps on the wrong thing.
Yeah, they're both massive issues, and we've got millions of people in this country who are not economically active. We've got to have a way that we get those people into work, so we don't rely so much onto foreign nationals and in effect write off all these people at home. We've got to have a pathway for that. But yes, the foreign the boats is very visual. People can see it on the telly. They see what happens in a way that you don't see legal immigration in the same way. And people do have a belief in fair play, and this is clearly not fair. When people they're not fleeing persecution; they're fleeing France, for goodness sake. And people just see that this is grotesquely unfair. And I think the British sense of fairness also means that this is a really big issue for them too.
OK, Phil Davies, Julie Cook, really fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for your time. And do let us know what you make of that. GBViews at gbnews.com. Now, coming up, we're going to be bringing you some early festive cheer because our reporter, Tony Maguire, is walking in a winter wonderland. We'll find out where in just a few minutes' time. You're with me, Ellie Costello, on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's
teeth.
your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live. Lots of you have been emailing in this morning. Thank you so much for your company. I'm just going to share a few of them now. Gurpreet, good morning to you, says uncontrolled migration and no vetting is causing anger amongst ordinary people. Peter, good morning to you, Peter, says immigration is what's ruining this country. This is what we, the general public, are really worried about. You can't get a doctor's appointment because we've let too many people into this country. It's a fact, and politicians are afraid to say it. Paul says immigration is his biggest fear. He says he's abandoned the Tories as they've lost control. And Nicholas says he wrote to Boris Johnson at 10 Downing Street a couple of years ago, warning him to get a handle on immigration and also warning that Conservatives would lose the next general election if they failed to do so. I never got a reply. Well, do keep those views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com on any of the stories that we are talking about today. I'll try and share as many as I can with you. Now, it's been just over a week since the renowned Winter Wonderland opened here in London at Hyde Park. Complete with an ice rink, rollercoaster rides and Christmas food stalls, Winter Wonderland has attracted tourists from around the world since it first opened in 2007. Today, though, it's Glasgow's turn, as their very own festive paradise is set to open this afternoon. Well, joining us now to tell me all about what's going on in Glasgow is GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire. Very good morning to you, Tony. It's starting to look very busy there in Glasgow. Tell us what's coming up for us.
Good morning. Well, certainly anyone who's brave enough to go out in this -1, which is held since about 8 o'clock last night, very frosty here in Glasgow, but I will say that people are feeling the warmth of the Christmas spirit. 30 sleeps to go now, and certainly Glasgow has been patient for this, about as patient as you have to be not to open that 25th day of the Advent calendar too early, or your nana playing Chris Rea driving home for Christmas for the 40th time. However, today is the day for George Square, this much beloved event held by M&N, who put this on year after year. Now, this year, we're going to see the return of the ice rink, a much beloved favourite of this event every year, and we're going to see some new things as well, because as we know, Glasgow City Council, well, they've held back on spending on some public events over the last few months. Glasgow, for the first time in I can remember, went without a public fireworks display this year in November, and the council said that they were putting more money towards Christmas. And certainly this year we're seeing quite a lot more here at Winterfest in George Square. We're seeing a sensory room for some of the more sensory sensitive people and that will be coming along later today. And we're also seeing a silent disco. How that has to do with Christmas, I don't know, but maybe Chris Rea will even haunt you in there. Now, this is the second Winterfest in Glasgow. There's another one that's been open for a couple of weeks now in St Enoch Square, along with the usual German sausages and mulled wine and some churros this year. Lots of rides today, and of course the cost of living crisis has been quite a big talking point as well, because if the cost of living crisis is affecting people, while it's free to enter here, you know, the big wheel you can see behind me is going to cost £7.50 a time, and certainly some of the children's rides will be £3 a go as well. But that money is going to somewhere. The Clutha Trust is hoping to raise £50,000 to help families who are really struggling around Glasgow and Scotland with £100 utility voucher to help them keep themselves warm over the festive period. And certainly if this weather is anything to go by now, and we're not even out of November yet, then I'm sure that will go down extremely gratefully with them. Lots to happen along here today, lots of fun and festive, and a lot of banking that festive spirit is going to keep us all warm for the rest of the day.
Well, let's hope so, Tony. It looks absolutely freezing there. Just before I let you go, is there a big Christmas tree? I can't spot one.
There is. I've just noticed before we came on air there that it's out of shot, but I'll tell you what, I'll make sure that viewers later on through the day can get some lots of lights, lots of baubles and lots of Christmas sparkle.
Well, that's something to look forward to. Thank you so much, Tony Maguire. Go get yourself a hot chocolate or something. Go and warm up. It looks absolutely freezing there in Glasgow,
yes,
but
please.
Lots to look forward to. Thank you. Now, it's been a particularly busy week for the royal family as King Charles and Queen Camilla hosted the President of South Korea for a state visit. It comes as the BBC have announced a new documentary which contains exclusive behind-the-scenes footage from the run-up to their Majesty's coronation in May. The royals are also bracing themselves ahead of the release of Omid Scobie's new book, Endgame, which is released on Tuesday, which is set to unearth more of the details surrounding the dramatic exit of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex from royal life. Lots to get through, and joining me to go through all of this latest news is former BBC royal correspondent and friend of the programme, Michael Cole. Very good to see you this morning, Michael. Thank you so much for your company. Let's get into Omid Scobie's new book, shall we? Because it's on the front of most of the papers this morning. And this allegation of frostiness between Catherine and Meghan Markle ahead of that walkabout in Windsor after the Queen's death. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. Good morning, Ellie. Oh, my goodness, what a surprise. There was some friction between Kate and Meghan. Who would have thunk it? I mean, what a tremendous bombshell from this book by Mr. Omid Scobie, who is sometimes called the megaphone or the mouthpiece of the Sussexes, which, of course, he denies. His first book was called Finding Freedom, and it was said that the Sussexes had nothing to do with that, but then it was later discovered that they had input to that book. This book, which is published on Tuesday, called Endgame, deals with various subjects, including the fact that it's alleged that Kate has spoken more about Meghan Markle than she has spoken to her. So quite clearly, they're not the best of friends. But are we surprised by that? I think this is all a bit been there before, heard this before, same old, same old. There we are on a happier day, on the engagement day. And weren't they well received in this country? Look how welcome they were. Apparently in the book, the Duchess of Sussex says she never wants to come to Britain again. She never felt comfortable here, and she had a terribly rotten time. Well, I'm sure that's a surprise to the people who stood 20 deep in Windsor Great Park and cheered them on their wedding day. And there was universal welcome in the media to the Sussexes as a breath of fresh air and a welcome addition to the royal family. Since that time, of course, they've There's Archwell Foundation, that's their sort of vehicle for their business enterprises, and they've appeared in various forums around the world promoting, well, their charities, I'm sure, but also themselves. And there we see the lovely, beautiful Meghan Markle. One wonders what they've got to worry about. There they are living in California in a hilltop fortress with 2 healthy, beautiful children. They've got lots of friends, lots of money, lots of praise, lots of fame, and lots of interesting things to do. I don't know why there should be bad feeling between the 2 families. They actually, by all rights, ought to be the best of friends and enjoying themselves.
It is such a shame, isn't it, Michael, as you say, looking back at happier times and what could have been, really, for this couple and for the wider family. But as we know, there is still very much a rift within the royal family. And that's another allegation, actually, in this book released on Tuesday. Allegedly, Prince Harry saying to King Charles, if you kick us out of Frogmore Cottage, you won't see your grandchildren again.
Yeah, well, of course, when they departed abruptly to Canada, and then that was a way station on the way to California, perhaps that's always the intended destination for Meghan Markle. The cottage, Frogmore Cottage, hard by Windsor Castle, was vacant. And I think it was probably reasonable for His Majesty the King to say, well, you know, if you're not living here, somebody else is going to be living here. And you better vacate it. Apparently then Prince said to his father, well, don't you want to see your grandchildren anymore? And I'm quite sure all the grandparents out there listening to this program absolutely abhor and deprecate children being used as weapons in any family dispute. There is nothing, in my view, more despicable than using your children as a weapon to win an argument. If that has happened, I'm sorry about that, because I had some respect for Prince Harry. I liked him, and I had nothing but praise for what he did, serving 2 tours in Afghanistan, when he put himself in a dangerous position, and he served his country. That's the great pity of it. He's had to give up his military positions, his titles. He's had to give up his duty. And I think that actually mattered to him, Elliot. I really do.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, Michael. I think that's something that he actually still battles with to this day. Really good to see you again, Michael Cole. Always very good to have you on the programme. Thank you so much for your time. Now, former Paralympic champion Oscar Pistorius will be released from prison in January. Oscar Pistorius shot Reeva Steenkamp, his girlfriend, on Valentine's Day in 2013 at his home in Pretoria, South Africa. He said he fired his gun through a bathroom door after mistaking her for an intruder in the early hours. The now 37-year-old has been granted parole from the 5th of January. Well, Reeva's mother, June Steenkamp, said that while she does not believe that her daughter's killer has ever shown remorse, she had nonetheless decided to forgive him a long time ago, as I knew that most certainly I would not be able to survive had I clung on to my anger. But we're asking today, can you ever truly and completely reform? Well, joining me now to talk about prison reform is motivational speaker and former prisoner Adnan Khan. Very good morning to you, Ads. Thank you very much for your company this morning. I mean, the Oscar Pistorius trial, that whole story is just something that haunts people all around the globe. It was a man, an absolute hero, the Blade Runner, a hero in South Africa and around the world, went from hero to zero after killing his girlfriend, shooting her through the bathroom door. Do you think a man like that, is it possible for him to reform?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me. And in terms of what reform and rehabilitation is, it's not just about changing your behaviour. It's about time to develop responsibility, empathy, and to positively contribute to society. Now, he's not even admitted his crime. So has he developed responsibility? Has he taken responsibility for his actions? I think not.
And what do you make of the mother of Reeva Steenkamp, June Steenkamp, when she says that she has decided to forgive Oscar Pistorius a long time ago because she thought holding on to that anger would kill her. What do you make of that kind of forgiveness that she has shown?
I think it's really courageous. I think she's absolutely a woman to be admired. And it's to a great extent, she's been through some really troubling situations. And as of recent years. So for her to come out with that statement, I think it just shows what kind of a family and what kind of a woman that she is. And in my eyes, she's the queen.
Ads, what do you think Oscar Pistorius, what do you think his experience will be like now, coming out of prison for the first time in 10 years?
Well, I think he's coming out of prison and going straight into a mansion. And so based on that, it's an unfortunate set of circumstances. And I think the law has let him, the South African law has it's the system that's let him down, because a life sentence here in England carries for murder, it's a mandatory life sentence, which means you have to serve all your time before you're even considered for parole. Now, when it comes to South Africa, it seems that murder doesn't carry a mandatory life sentence, and you can actually get out at the halfway stage. So I think it's the system that's ultimately let him down.
Adnan Khan, really good to have your thoughts on that story. He's a motivational speaker and a former prisoner who talks now a lot about prison reform. Thank you very much. And I want to broaden this out to our wider panel. And Mike, we were talking about this earlier, just such an extraordinary case, and many wouldn't believe he's free in just 10 years.
He won't actually be free fully until 2029. He's coming out and he's going to live with his uncle, who's very wealthy and has got a nice house in, one of the best districts of Durban, I think. And he's going to be under kind of house arrest. The mother, Mrs. Steenkamp, June Steenkamp, remarkable woman, because although she said, "I've found forgiveness in my heart," she's also made it clear she does not believe this man should be released because he is still a danger to women. And she actually wrote to the parole board and told them that. So this is a woman of many different views, clearly tormented. You should have heard her witness statement about my baby girl screaming as she was blasted to death with bullets and all that. A mother whose life has been devastated, who's prepared to forgive her daughter's killer, but for wider society wants to warn everybody this guy is very dangerous and shouldn't be back on the streets.
And great concerns as well in that statement about his attitude towards women and his temper.
Absolutely.
Do you think someone like that can reform, Nigel?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on the criminal and the crime. In a situation like this, I think it's really interesting, as Mike says, that Oscar's mother-in-law turned around and said, "Look, I think that he needs to actually have some anger management.
Yeah, that's right.
He needs to be dealt with there." And the whole point about parole, I mean, the two things that are most important are, firstly, you're not a danger to the public. If she thinks he is, I think that is actually a cause for concern for the parole board. The second thing is that you show genuine remorse for the crime that you committed.
And she says he never has.
Yeah, so at the moment, if you were looking at what the criteria is for the parole board to release any prisoner almost in any country, it doesn't appear to have been met, if you believe her.
And Phil, what is so heartbreaking about this story is not only the loss of Reva, who, as we were saying yesterday, Mike, just the most beautiful woman I think you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But you can just see the breakdown of the entire family. June Steenkamp saying in that statement in court that she believes her husband Barry died of a broken heart. It's not just Reva that died that day. She believes it's impacted the whole family.
No, exactly, and that's why, I mean, of course people can reform and we may or may not be a danger to society, but I think he probably is, but we can argue about that. The key thing here, though, is punishment. What is an appropriate punishment for the crime that he committed? And I think he's a very, very lucky person to be leaving prison so soon. As far as I was concerned, they should have locked him up and thrown away the key, personally.
And initially, he wasn't even going to go to prison.
I know, I agree.
The South African legal service worked. They convicted him first of all of manslaughter, or the equivalent. He was going to do about 12 months under house arrest, and then, fortunately, the legal system kicked into gear.
But we should ask, what is the...
Mike, Phil, I'm afraid we're just running out of time, but do stay with us. We'll be going through a lot more after this very short break.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with me, Ellie Costello. The time has just gone 11 a.m. Thank you very much for your company. And we've got a jam-packed show for you this hour. Here's what's coming up. As Hamas and Israel exchange prisoners and hostages, we'll be live from the now weekly event of Palestine rallies in London to see if the sight of families being reunited has impacted the views of those involved in this conflict. As Argentina and the Netherlands lurch to the right in this week's elections, is the populist surge unstoppable? Plus, as the government clamps down on XL bullies, is the problem with dog attacks the breed or the owners? That's what we'll be asking. And as shoppers take to the stores for Black Friday weekend, we'll be giving you all the tips and tricks to avoid the scams and bag yourself a genuine deal. But first, let's get a news update with Sophia.
Thanks, Ellie. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Israel has received a list of 14 hostages who will be released from captivity later today. Israel's prison service is preparing to release 42 Palestinian prisoners in the second phase of the hostage deal. 24 hostages were freed yesterday. Several women and children were taken to Schneider's Children's Medical Center in Israel by helicopter. Authorities say they're responding well to medical treatment. Some hostages have been reunited with their family members, according to the IDF. These pictures show the hostages being transferred in the Red Cross cars via the Rafah crossing. Those released include 13 Israelis, some of whom are dual nationals, 10 Thai citizens and a Filipino national. Qatar's foreign ministry says 39 Palestinian women and children have also been released from Israeli prisons as part of the deal. Psychiatrist at Shalvalta Mental Health Center in Israel, Yuval Bloch, has been speaking at a press conference. He addressed the trauma of post-captivity.
This is way beyond what you usually think of trauma, and with 30 years of experience, I've treated quite a bit of trauma patients. I think we should ask if this is the only disorder we're going to see, and if it's only the children, the Israeli children in the combat zone. We know now for certain that this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Palestinians who have fled the conflict between Israel and Hamas have started to return home as fighting pauses in the enclave. The temporary ceasefire took effect on Friday and is expected to continue until Monday. Meanwhile, trucks loaded with humanitarian aid supplies are passing through the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt by convoy. Egypt estimates that 200 trucks will enter Gaza daily during the 4-day truce. Meanwhile, the Met Police are set to clarify what type of language might break the law when chanted or displayed at a pro-Palestinian march. Tens of thousands of protesters are expected to gather in London today, calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The force will hand out leaflets at the march, warning against using words or images likely to land you in jail. Around 1,500 officers will be deployed for the protests, which comes amid a temporary truce in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Founder and chair of Friends of Al-Aqsa, Ismail Patel, told GB News what protesters hope to achieve today.
We're here today to highlight that a pause in the ceasefire does not mean freedom for the Palestinian people. We need to make sure there's a total ceasefire, an end to siege and an end to occupation. And our achievement really is to make sure that our government understands this and they enforce upon the Israelis to end the bombardment and the genocide that is taking place in Gaza.
Russia has hit Kyiv with the biggest drone attack of the conflict so far, according to Ukraine's Air Force. At least 5 people were injured when Shahed drones descended on the capital overnight. Explosions could be heard as the aircrafts were intercepted, with buildings damaged across multiple districts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described the strikes as an act of willful terror. The former Minneapolis police officer convicted of the death of George Floyd has been stabbed in prison while serving his sentence. That's according to US media. 47-year-old Derek Chauvin was reportedly stabbed by another inmate in an Arizona prison on Friday and seriously injured. The reported incident comes days after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal, where he argued he had not received a fair trial. Mr. Chauvin is serving multiple sentences for George Floyd's death in 2020, which triggered widespread protests against police brutality and racism. The first frost has bitten the UK as temperatures fell well below freezing across large parts of the country overnight. The Met Office says the cold spell could also see snow fall next week. Tonight is expected to be the coldest night of the season across the country, with those first sub-zero temperatures, and they could possibly reach -7 Celsius across northwestern England and in the south, and -4 in rural areas of Wales tomorrow morning. London's traditional Christmas tree has been chosen, standing an impressive 62 feet tall. Norway's customary Christmas gift has been felled ahead of its trip to the capital. It grew in Nordmarka, the forest just north of Oslo, and will be loaded onto a ship bound for British shores. The tree will arrive in central London this week, with the festive lights switching on December the 7th. The Norwegian spruce is sent each year as a token of thanks for Britain's support during the Second World War. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. And now it's back to Ellie.
Thanks, Sophia. You're watching Saturday Morning Live. Now, Israeli security officials have said that they have received a list of 14 hostages to be released as early as today as part of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. It comes as Israel is to release 42 Palestinian prisoners in the second phase of the agreement. Meanwhile, in London, thousands of protesters are expected to march today, calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Well, joining us now live from Park Lane, ahead of the pro-Palestine rally later on, is GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Good morning to you, Catherine. And you have been to a number of these marches in recent weeks, haven't you? So what are we expecting to see today?
Yes, these marches have been going on. This is now the 7th Saturday in a row of pro-Palestinian protests in London. Of course, it's not just London. They're happening across the United Kingdom and indeed across the world since those horrendous Hamas atrocities in Israel on October the 7th. And then the war, the attack on Hamas and the death toll rising in Gaza. So today it's a very lovely, sunny and very cold day. I expect the turnout will be high, as it always has been. We're up near Marble Arch now. The march will begin at about 12:30. We'll progress down to Hyde Park Corner, take a left along Piccadilly if you know central London, go through Trafalgar Square and end up going down Whitehall, scheduled to finish by 5 p.m. And I think that's significant because I've been to a number of these protests. They always follow the same pattern. They begin very peacefully. Most people, you see lots of families, dogs, kids on shoulders. It's all quite good-natured, but of course there's always an element who are after trouble, and as night falls, that's where the problems begin. Now, I was just talking to some police officers just before we came on air, and they've handed me one of these leaflets. They're spelling out to protesters basically how not to get arrested. Just to give you a summation, it says the law protects the right to lawful protest. The Met Police supports your right to legally make your voice heard. However, the law also protects people from racist abuse and from terrorism being promoted, and goes on to say that a minority have crossed the line in previous protests. So on the back, it says explicitly, to avoid ending up in our cells, don't use words or images that incite hatred against any faith, that support Hamas or any other banned organisation, or that celebrate or promote acts of terrorism. And it says, if in doubt, bin any placard or sign that might break these rules. We've seen on social media in previous weeks really very clearly anti-Semitic placards, and I was talking about what language in terms of chants would or would not be acceptable. A lot of debate about that controversial slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which I have heard chanted briefly a number of times on previous marches. The police are saying they don't believe that does constitute grounds for arrest. They say it has different meanings. However, anybody calling for jihad, as sometimes they have done before, anybody shouting jihad may well end up being arrested. Also, if you have a face covering, if it's not for religious grounds, if you have your face covered with just your eyes showing, the police will tell you to uncover your face. If you refuse to do that, you might potentially be arrested. And obviously Hamas or Hezbollah flags. But let's see, it's a lovely day, and we'll be reporting for the rest of the day from the march.
And of course you'll be there for us on GB News. Thank you so much, Catherine Forster. Now it's time to go through the top stories of the week, and I'm delighted to be joined by MP for Shipley, Philip Davies, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and the broadcaster and journalist Mike Parry. Very good to see you all again. And we need to talk about Nigel Farage, don't we? And his performance in I'm a Celebrity, or shall I say, actually, his bottom.
Well, I want to talk about Lorraine Kelly, actually.
Well, it all relates, doesn't it? Yeah.
It all relates, but I was absolutely shocked. I've worked with Lorraine over the years, very professional, you know, knows the business and all that. I was astonished when she came out with... She expressed her astonishment on a chat show that Farage was just 59 adding, I thought he was a hell of a lot older than that. That is astonishing. You get the face you deserve. Thankfully, you really do. And then said how traumatised she was when she'd seen the rear portion of Nigel Farage as he was in the shower. Now, if you spin that round, and if a man
spin round,
but if a male broadcaster had said that about a female celebrity, that would be the end of his career. I'm certain of that. And so I think this is very unfair, very unlike Lorraine Kelly, I think, to have gone into that. But Mr Farage himself now, of this parish, of course, is questioning it and saying, hang on, has Lorraine apologised for body-shaming me? Actually said that through a spokesman who, of course, is watching the show and picking us all up on various points of it,
No,
you know?
of course. I mean, to be fair to Lorraine, I have seen more than Nigel Farage than I ever hoped I would see on this show. I mean, he's a very naked person. I didn't quite appreciate that.
But you haven't body-shamed him, have you, Ellie?
I haven't body-shamed him.
Yeah.
Is that where the line is, do you think, here, Nigel?
The whole thing... TV is a visual medium, so people tend to criticise our views, what we say. I think they've also got a right to actually criticise appearances.
Do you?
Yeah, I do, as well, because of that if you're appearing on television, especially if you decide to show your bottom, then that is inviting people to comment on it. Now, what Lorraine was doing, I think, is probably... it's a bit rude. It's not the politest way of actually expressing herself.
And male on female, it would have been called bullying.
That's
believe
right.
me.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in fact, that it shouldn't be. I mean, there should be an equality about this. But the idea that she can comment on it, I think I would defend her right to do that.
And how do you think Nigel is doing, Nigel, in the jungle? Because you've actually been watching, haven't you? Do you think he could go all the way here?
Yeah, I don't actually... It's not one of my favourite shows, but I always watch when a politician I know is actually on it. It's probably a form of sadism or whatever to see them do all the Bush Tucker trials. I think he's been doing really well. As you would expect, he's very personable. He seems to be getting on mostly with his campmates. So from that point of view, he's been successful. He's tried to explain certain things, which was his mission to go out there, like Brexit. He's done that in a very succinct way. I mean, I don't agree with Brexit, but I think that he's managed to sort of boil it down to be able to talk to people about it. Interesting after this is his other intention was to reach a bigger audience in the sense of a young audience who watched the show. Be interesting to see after the event if that cuts through.
Yes, that will be really interesting to see. And what also will be interesting, Phil, is if he can have a similar level of success to Matt Hancock last year, who actually came third in the jungle in the end, who went from one of the most hated characters, actually ended up doing really well towards the end. Do you think we'll see a similar story?
Well, he did well in the jungle.
Nigel?
I think he went from being one of the most hated politicians to being one of the most hated politicians. But he did well. He did well in between in the jungle. I hope Nigel does better than Matt Hancock does after the jungle. I think he's doing really well. He's not only that, he's also got stuck in, hasn't he? He's been eating whatever it is, crocodile anus and kangaroo testicles and whatever, and he's been, and he's got stuck in. I think he's doing really, really well. I think some people will change their view of him. And he's not without a chance of winning.
I think Nigel's reason for going in is far different to Matt Hancock's. Matt Hancock knew it was all over for him. He was never, ever going to be rehabilitated in the public eye, so he just went hell for leather out there, didn't he? And didn't care what his behaviour was going to be like. Nigel Farage, in my view, is conducting a very, very professional and careful campaign to enhance his reputation, not to destroy it. And I think it's working, because I think people are seeing a side of him they've never seen before. He looks responsible, he looks reasonable, and when people have attacked him and accused him of things, which are politically biased, he hasn't reacted badly at all.
And he hasn't ruled out running for number 10, has he? Which is very, very interesting. Do you think he's going to win over the public with this film?
He hasn't ruled out running for number 10 as a Conservative. I don't think he's ever. I don't think he's ruled out in the future. And lots of Tory members absolutely love Nigel Farage, and those of us who were at the Conservative Party conference, he was virtually mobbed by the Tory members at the conference. So, if he wants, I mean, I don't know how much of a political future Nigel wants. He's put a lot into it. It's been draining for him. He might think, I've done my bit, and he's done more than enough, to be perfectly honest. But if he did feel, I want to go back into the political arena, I think he's got a big future ahead of him in that arena too, if he wants,
I agree with you.
it.
I agree. I don't take the, the line that other people have expressed that, oh, well, you can't take him seriously anymore. I think people are taking him more seriously because of this than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that should he wish to be a Conservative politician, I mean, the indication from Rishi Sunak is, yes, he could come and join the party. It is the only way he'll become an MP. He's kept trying. He couldn't do it
7 times, I think.
Yeah, he couldn't do it when he was with UKIP. I mean, simply the first past the post system conspires against him. Were he just to join a mainstream political party, which would probably have to be yours on that basis, that I can see you become an MP. Whether he could become Prime Minister, I don't know. He's certainly the most influential politician of the last 20 years.
Nigel, if the Tories...
Brexit wouldn't be delivered without him.
Nigel, if the Tory... I'm Philip. If the Tories let him in, he'd be a bigger beast than anybody else in the party, wouldn't he?
He'd be very well.
Did you see the picture this week of Rishi Sunak and David Cameron walking across Horse Guards Parade?
Yeah.
David Cameron 6'2", Rishi Sunak 5'7", and to me, there was only one person who looked like a leader in that picture, and it was David Cameron.
Can't help the height, though, can they?
Well, no, but the other thing was...
That's better than anybody.
Well,
body shaming here.
That's a bit harsh. But what I'm saying is, David Cameron was in the middle of 3 men.
He did look very prime ministerial.
Yeah, and Rishi Sunak was standing on the left, a little chap, and it just looked like Cameron was in charge.
Yeah, the optics of that were very interesting, weren't they? Yeah. Allowing him to walk right in the centre across Horse Guards
Most
Parade.
spin doctors would have made sure that picture was never taken.
Exactly. Yeah.
Look, should we chat gardening? Because apparently 2 hours in your garden is enough to grow happiness. The story, Mike.
Yeah, well, people have said this over the years, haven't they? I mean, Prince Charles talks with his plants. And he actually does. That wasn't, a foolish story. And that's what people do when they garden. They interact with their plants, don't they? And they, nurture them and make them feel good as the plants make other people feel good. I know loads of people who say that for mental health reasons, gardening is the best you can do. I prefer to go down the pub. That's
So do I.
Yeah, exactly. That sorts my mental health out. But this study, which was quite an extensive one, says the number one reason people gave for gardening was for mental health, and the number one reason in trying to find succour and comfort during a busy life is to go into the garden.
OK, do either of you have green fingers?
No.
Or you're not won over by
I'm
this?
sort of with Mike. I'd sooner watch the football or the horse racing on the telly. Esther loves gardening, but I can't. I'd sooner put my feet up and watch the sport on the telly, personally.
I think it's something you need to get into. I mean, it's not something that comes naturally to me, but apparently if you do get into it, it's very therapeutic.
I'm sure it is. I mean, I've got a garden, but I've got nothing in it.
So is it a concrete garden?
Nothing, not quite concrete. There's some false grass there as well. But I'd rather not actually have to tend a garden, which is why we don't have any plants. So it may well be, if I tried it, it would actually improve my mental health. I don't know, but I'm not about to try it.
I totally agree with that. I've got a roof garden because I live in a penthouse.
Oh,
so
very nice.
I have a roof garden attached to the side of my property. My housekeeper does all the gardening in the roof garden, but like Nige here, they're pots with plants in them, you see what I mean? The tending and all that kind of stuff. But I had a girlfriend once who was so keen on gardening, I had to take her to all the big garden shows, like Hampton Court, OK? Spent 4 hours at Hampton Court. There is nothing more boring than spending 4 hours at Hampton Court.
That's real love.
You wanted to be in the pub, didn't you?
Of course I did.
Maybe we should start with potted plants. Maybe that's the way to go. But do let us know, are you a keen gardener? Do you have green fingers? Are you feeling the benefits for your mental and physical health? Do let us know. GBNews at gbnews.com. But do stay with us, because coming up after this short break, after Italy, Argentina and now Holland elect right-wing leaders, will other countries follow suit? We're going to be talking about that. You're with me, Ellie Costello, on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live. Thank you so much for your company. Now, on Thursday, the results of the Dutch election were counted, with the outcome suggesting that Geert Wilders, often described as far-right, has won the majority of votes and may therefore become the next Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Well, Wilders' success joins a growing trend seen in recent times of unusual governments and leaders performing strongly in elections. For instance, Argentina recently elected Javier Milei, and Giorgia Meloni is the Prime Minister of Italy. So why are voters turning towards these kinds of parties, and might the rest of the world follow suit? Well, joining me again to discuss this trend is Mike Parry, Nigel Nelson and Philip Davies. Brilliant to have you all with us. And Mike, we were discussing this yesterday. It's the most fascinating move to the right, isn't it?
It is the most fascinating move to the right. And we've all had time to research a bit more about what's happening in Holland now. The previous Prime Minister, a gentleman called Mr Rutte, and he fell out of favour for failing to curb rampant immigration, which topped 400,000 in 2022. Think of that. A massive total in a country country with a population of just 17 million on a landmass 1/6 the size of the UK. So that's the size of their problem, in proportion much bigger than what we've got here. And Dutch people just eventually said the net migration figure of 223,000 was the sheer volume of arrivals. They didn't want anything more to do with it. Immigrants were being birthed on cruise ships, right, off Amsterdam and the port of Rotterdam. And that's how bad it's got in Holland. And in the end, the people of Holland, when they were given the opportunity, said, we've had enough.
Nigel, it really is fascinating, isn't it? What do you think the factors are that are driving the success of these right-wing parties? Is it migration, or is it culture wars, or is it something entirely different?
I think in this case it probably is migration, but also politics goes in cycles. So we had a populist cycle where we had the likes of Donald Trump and Boris Johnson. I wonder if we might be going through a right-wing cycle now. You mentioned Giorgia Meloni in Italy, Viktor Orban in Hungary, the right of the Tory party. I'm astonished by the battle for the heart and soul of the Tory party.
Argentina.
And how big that the right seems to be becoming there and how powerful it is. I regret that, but as I say, it may be a cycle we're actually going through and we may pass out the other end.
I mean, Phil, it is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, the rise of Suella Braverman, the darling of the Tory right. What do you think will happen at the next general election in terms of this rise of right-wing parties? Do you think we will see Reform coming up doing very well in the next general election?
They could do. I mean, it is about immigration, and mainstream politicians need to take heed all around the world that the public are absolutely... They're angry about this, and they're rightly angry about it, and politicians have got to do something about it. Now, in the UK, we're slightly different from Holland because we have first-past-the-post system, and therefore it's a lot harder for minor parties to get a foothold in the way that they can where you have proportional representation. But make no mistake that if the mainstream parties do not tackle immigration, you will see a growth in smaller parties, and they will make a big difference to the result of the next election. I think it's a real warning shot across the bows for mainstream politicians.
I totally agree, and Holland has always been the most liberal of countries, hasn't it? You know, when I was a kid, we used to go to Holland, so you could go into a cafe and smoke funny fags and drink lots of beer, you know, and that kind of stuff. Not something, of course, I'd ever advocate anybody to do.
No.
But Ireland as well, we've seen riots. Ireland's a laid-back country.
Yeah, and hopefully we can touch upon that in our next panel discussion. But Phil, Nigel, Mike, do stay with me because I want to get your opinion on this next story, because on Monday, MPs are going to debate 2 petitions relating to dangerous dogs. Now, there are currently 5 dog breeds that are banned in the UK after they each earned a reputation of being dangerous or aggressive. However, many people oppose those specific bans, and instead they say that the onus should be placed on the dog's owners. Well, our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has more on this story.
Brave, he heard the screaming, he heard somebody needed help, and in this day and age it's hard to find people like that.
Back in 2017, David's brother John died as a result of a dog attack. When a pit bull terrier turned on its owner, John intervened to try and save her life. He was also mauled and later died of his injuries. The dog was destroyed, but David has now chosen to speak out. He feels the law needs to be more strict on owners.
They are like a furry sort of firearm, aren't they? They can just go off at any stage. And I think it's important now that basically is that they need to be dealt with just as much as the dogs. Because, OK, I mean, the dog will be put down, but then in theory the owner will just get another dog, and life just carries on. So I just believe we need to take a stance on this and basically make sure that the owners and the breeders are brought to justice.
The owner of the dog was never prosecuted, although after his death, John's family were able to get some compensation.
Compensation is made up of many elements. Injuries, obviously, and the injuries in this case were significant, both physical and the psychological knock-on for John, because it caused depression, anxiety, fear of going outside.
There are now 5 breeds of dog banned in the UK, including the Pit Bull Terrier. The most recent addition to the list is the XL Bully, after a recent spate of attacks saw the government take action.
We will then ban the breed under the Dangerous Dogs Act, and new laws will be in place by the end of the year. These dogs are dangerous. I want to reassure the public that we will take all necessary steps to keep people safe.
However, many would argue that a blanket ban on a breed isn't the solution.
They just don't know the breed. We had it a few years back with Staffies. Everyone was scared of Staffies unless they'd met one. It just moves on to different breeds of dogs all the time. We've had it for years with Rottweilers, Dobermans, Pit Bulls, Staffies, and now it's a turn of the XL Bully.
Many of the dogs here at Bleakhall Animal Sanctuary were brought in after they were mistreated by their owners. But what kind of long-term impact does this abuse have on the behaviour of a dog?
We do sometimes get difficult dogs coming into the sanctuary, and they just take a little bit more training, a little bit more behaviour work. Sometimes they're under-socialised and just aren't used to strangers, so we do work, but that isn't on a specific breed. That can be any type of dog. If you've got a 60-kilogram dog with a young lad walking around with it who can't control it, it is an accident waiting to happen, and I fully appreciate something needs doing, but putting a blanket ban on it is not the answer.
Research from the Dog Control Coalition suggests that breed-specific legislation, such as the ban on XL bullies, is ineffective. And for David, he believes that if there were harsher sentences for dog owners, his brother would perhaps still be alive. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Look, really interested to know what you think of the XL bully ban. Should there be such a thing as a blanket ban on dogs? Or is that not the right way to go? Should it be something like licensing instead? Do let me know what you think. gbnews@gbnews.com. We're going to be discussing it in just a few minutes with my panel. But first, let's get a news bulletin with Sophia.
It's 11:30. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Israel has received a list of 14 hostages who will be released from captivity later today. Israel's prison service is preparing to release 42 Palestinian prisoners in the second phase of the hostage deal. 24 hostages were freed yesterday. Several women and children were taken to Schneider's Children's Medical Center in Israel by helicopter. Authorities say they are responding well to medical treatment. Some hostages have been reunited with their family members there. These pictures show the hostages being transferred in Red Cross cars via the Rafah crossing. Those released included 13 Israelis, some of whom are dual nationals, 10 Thai citizens and a Filipino national. Qatar's foreign ministry says 39 Palestinian women and children have also been released from Israeli prisons as part of the deal. Meanwhile, the Met Police are set to clarify what type of language might break the law when chanted or displayed at pro-Palestinian marches. Tens of thousands of protesters are expected to gather in London today, calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The force will hand out leaflets at the march warning against using words or images likely to land you in jail. Around 1,500 officers will be deployed for the protests, which comes amid a temporary truce in the Israel-Hamas conflict. The first frost has bitten the UK as temperatures fell well below freezing across large parts of the country overnight. The Met Office says the cold spell could also see snowfall next week. Tonight is expected to be the coldest night of the season across the country with sub-zero temperatures. And they could possibly reach -7 across northwestern England and in the south, and -4 in rural parts of Wales by tomorrow morning. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist. And you survived? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning Live. Well, before the break, we were talking about the dangerous dogs controversy as the government moves to ban XL bullies. So owners of dogs that meet the government's definition of American XL bullies have until the 31st of January to put them to sleep, which they can claim £200 compensation. Alternatively, if they do want to keep their dogs, they must have them microchipped, insured, neutered and muzzled outdoors. You also need to purchase a certificate of exemption, which is about £92. So I'm with my panel now, Mike Parry, Nigel Nelson and Phil Davies. And Phil, I wanted to start with you on this. Do you think the government's right to pursue this blanket ban on American XL bullies?
No.
No.
I think when you make decisions on a knee-jerk reaction to events, it's very seldom the right thing to do. And I think this is just a knee-jerk reaction. And actually, you know, you shouldn't write off an entire breed of dog. It's every dog's different. And I think that, you know, really the onus of is about the owners. And actually, if dogs misbehave, you know, it's like saying, well, you know, a man's committed a crime, so let's put every man in prison. That kind of approach to dogs. I just don't think it's remotely sensible. I think you get good owners, bad owners, and I think we should focus on the owners. And I think it'll be futile anyway, because in a few years' time there'll just be another breed that's been developed, and you'll be forever, if you'll forgive the pun, chasing your tail.
OK. Nigel, what do you think?
Well, for the first time, I think, ever, I've actually agreed with every word that Phil has just said.
Harmony on the sofa.
I must be wrong. Yeah, basically that. I think that the Dangerous Dogs Act back in 1991 was in itself a knee-jerk reaction, and as a result, it got a lot of things wrong. We're now in a situation where we can't really even define an XL bully dog, so that's caused difficulties. In an ideal world, world, you would have, as you mentioned earlier, some kind of licensing system, and that would be where you make sure that the dog and the owner are basically safe, that they work together, you can see that they won't cause trouble later on. That's an ideal world. I can see it's a difficult thing to go and do. But broadly, it's the owner, not the dog, as Phil just said.
Do you think there's such a thing as a bad dog, Mike, or is it bad
I so
owners?
totally disagree with my two esteemed panellists here. I mean, utter nonsense. To call it a knee-jerk reaction, these dogs kill people. That's not a knee-jerk reaction, that's a human life that's gone. And if it's only one human life, you ban them. The thing is, there's lots of breeds of dogs in the world. Why do you need an XL Bully dog, which in its DNA has been trained to fight and to kill when it's been crossbred from other breeds? Why do you need one of those? Why not have a Spaniel? Why not have a Labrador? You don't need an XL Bully dog unless you've got something missing up here and you want to appear to be the toughest guy in the neighbourhood, leading your snarling dog around on a chain. That's what they're for, honestly, to try and make people feel good. And dogs and guns, the same argument all the time. It's not the gun, it's not the dog, it's the owner, right? The only thing is that guns always kill, right? A gun can always kill somebody. Most dogs don't kill people, so why have a dog that does kill somebody? Honestly, I just couldn't disagree with you two more. and you're both in very responsible positions in society, and I think you're misleading the general public.
Well, it's very controversial, isn't it? Do let us know what you think at home. gbviews@gbnews.com. The three of you have been fantastic today. Thank you so much. Mike Parry, Nigel Nelson, Philip Davies. Really good to have you on the panel. Thank you so much for your thoughts on today's story. Really good to have you with me. Now, with Black Friday sales this weekend, there are lots of bargains to be had. But do be aware, because new data from TSB has revealed an increase in scams targeting consumers in the run-up to Christmas. According to new research, purchase fraud, that's when you're deceived into paying for an item or service that doesn't exist, is up by 5%. There are more scams out there, though, with experts warning that AI is being used to trick shoppers. It's really very complicated. Well, with me now to talk through the shopping scams and what we should be looking out for is the consumer expert, more commonly known as the complaining cow, Helen Chudney. Very good to see you this morning, Helen. Oh, it's an absolute minefield out there for people, isn't it, who are trying to bag a bargain in the run-up to Christmas. How can we protect ourselves when we're shopping online?
Well, there's a few ways, and that's when you get all the emails that are constantly coming in, particularly around Black Friday and Black Weekend, and all of that, is to be very careful about clicking any links in those emails. Be absolutely sure that it's something that you've signed up to, because if you click on a link that isn't to a site that that's legit, they're going to take all your information. There are lots of copycat websites out there, so be really careful. Don't click from links in. Do all your research, double check, triple check that it is a genuine site, particularly if you've never been there before. Look for things like the return address for any issues, and if that's not in the UK, you might well have some problems with sending it back. Make sure that you've got HTTPS at the front. That's the padlock. That doesn't mean necessarily it's a genuine site, but it will mean that your financial information is protected. And use a credit card, which will always give you that extra protection as well.
It's so difficult, isn't it, when you think about the context of all of this? We're in a cost of living crisis. You can see why people are so desperate to bag a bargain in the run-up to Christmas, and they're desperately looking to save some money. And it's these kind of scammers that are utilising that, really.
Absolutely, and that's why you have to be really, really alert. And I would sign up to the Which Scam Alert service, because that keeps you up to date with the scams that are going on at the moment, or at least some of them, because there are thousands of them. But that's quite a good service to sign up to that will keep you alert, being aware of the emails that come through of the postage ones, which most people seem to know about now, the email that says try to deliver an item. And we now want to charge you. Be careful of those kinds of things. And of course, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
Helen, really good advice. Thank you so much for bringing that to us on Saturday Live. Thank you very much. That's Helen Doudney, the complaining cow, with her tips of how to avoid being scammed in the run-up to Christmas. So just keep our eyes peeled on that. Really good advice from her. Now, we want to bring you some really emotional pictures that we've got coming in from Israel now. This is Yoni Katz Asher. He has been reunited with his wife, Doron, and their two daughters, Raz and Aviv, after they were released by Hamas yesterday. Let's have a look at this video now.
געגעתם אליי? כן? חשבתם על אבא? כל הזמן. חביבי, חשבת על אבא? כן? הזמן. חשבת עליי דברים טובים? כן? מה אמא אמרה עליי?
Really beautiful images of a family being reunited after 7 weeks being held in captivity. You can't even imagine what Doron and her two daughters, Raz and Aviv, have been through in the past 7 weeks. But wonderful news, some hope, really, in the most awful situation in Gaza and in Israel. Yoni Katz Asher there being reunited with his wife and their two daughters. They were released by Hamas yesterday. We are expecting a further 14 hostages to be released today, all going well. And, of course, we'll bring that to you on GB News. Now, it's time for your weekly dose of sports and showbiz. And I'm delighted to have our very own sports guru, Aidan McGee, and showbiz journalist Hayley Palmer with me in the studio. Very good morning to you both. Great to see you.
Lovely to have you here.
Yeah, this is a bit different, isn't it?
Nice.
Yeah, this is lovely. Really good to see you both. Where should we begin? Should we start with showbiz?
Let's start showbiz because I'm a celebrity. Have you been watching it?
We've got to talk about it, yes.
We have to talk about it. I'm absolutely hooked. But I have to say that Nella Rose, for me, I'm finding her very uncomfortable to watch this
But that's
week.
what she's there for, isn't it? Just to wind people up.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, she's a YouTube star. I actually hadn't heard of her. But
That much of a star.
no, but she's gone in there. I tried to give her a chance, but every time I'm like, oh no, I can't watch it. I couldn't watch it when she was saying that to Fred, the comment. In the week, I know it was really highlighted in the press, and for me, she's ruining it. Actually, for me, I can't watch it because of her. Because she's just.
Are you going to give up on it?
No, I'm not going to give up on it because I'm not like that. But I'm going to stay with it.
You're just hoping she gets voted out.
I'm hoping she's going to get voted out first, yeah.
And I think that could happen now, Hayley, because she went in as one of the favourites and she's really quickly come down the ranks because she just wants to fight with everyone, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you know what? I can see she's got a lot of hurt, and I do feel for her that she's lost her parents, and, you know, I do understand that. But I do think that when you're going into the jungle, it is a team effort, and you have to get on with people, and it's a mindset as well. And everybody else seems to be fine, but she's just winding it up every night. And, yeah, so for me, I would like to see her get voted out first. Harsh, but fair.
Hayley, you've charted the career of a lot of these people over the years. Do you think she will regret the way she's behaved now when she looks back in 10 years' time?
Yeah, maybe, because I think she's in the moment, and obviously emotions are high. You know, you're not eating properly, you're not sleeping properly, you're getting cold, and where I wouldn't be very good either.
No.
But I think when she comes out and watches back, she probably will go, oh, do you know what? It was a bit overdramatic.
That's what I think.
Who do you think is doing well, Hayley? Who is surprising you in the jungle?
I love Sam Thompson. Yeah. I just think he's like a little golden retriever puppy, and he's just beautiful, and he's so endearing. He does have ADHD, so he has a lot of energy, but he's so giving, and he's such a people person. He's so endearing that I'd love to see him go all the way.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on this, Hayley. I think Sam's going to do really well, and we can't talk about I'm a Celebrity without talking about Nigel. How do we think Nigel's doing?
I think he's coming across really well.
Do you?
Yeah. He's looking very trim as well.
I've seen too much of Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
Thinking far too much.
I know. I was a bit shocked. I was like, oh, OK.
I think he's coming across really well. But he's hugely charismatic, and he got 4 million votes in that election, so people like him. And so it wasn't a surprise to me whatsoever. And over a long haul, you can't. You get a good opportunity there, blank canvas almost, to project your personality. And to me, so far, that's exactly what he's done.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's gone in there, and when he's got a task, he just gets on about it. That's what I like about him. There's no screaming or like, no, I can't do that. He's like, right, what have I got to do? I'm on it, and he does it.
And do you think we're seeing the real Nigel, or do you think we've still very much got the politician Nigel?
We're seeing a bit of both, actually. I think it's quite strategic, isn't it? I mean, I could see him being back on frontline politics again. I mean, you know, you look at the spirit of the times right now and exactly what's happening, I think he's probably needed. Many people would argue that, and he's probably using his platform as well as the money he's got in his back pocket to make the most of it. Why not?
I mean, there's a lot of challenges going on at the moment. I'd like to see not so many challenges and actually just hear them talking. That's my favourite bit.
Chat, don't you?
I just want the gossip. That's just me.
You just want to hear the gossip. Right, Aidan, let's have a look in the sports world, shall we? Pep Guardiola.
Well, yeah, they've got a massive game, biggest game of the season coming up at 12:30 today. They host Liverpool. It's a first against second tie at the top of the Premier League. Now, the backdrop to this, of course, is that they've been going toe-to-toe for a number of years. But Manchester City have more pressing problems, or we think they might have in the new year. They've had those charges hanging over from February, 115 charges of alleged financial impropriety. Now, the issue here is that Everton received a huge punishment last week. They were deducted 10 points for one charge, being found guilty of one charge of financial impropriety. Manchester City have been found guilty, they've been charged, rather, with 115. So it begs the question, what on earth is going to happen to them? Is it going to be anything like what happens to Everton? But the context, of course, is that yesterday Pep Guardiola was asked about it. He wasn't happy with the line of questioning. He thought, well, these charges are different to the ones we've got with Everton. And if Manchester City were to get relegated, I'd manage them all the way down in League One, which means they're going to be playing teams like Portsmouth and Gillingham and teams like that. And you can see them down there. And if they drop it... Having said that, Ellie, it's not incumbent on that division. If that division doesn't want them, they have to drop as far down until they find a division they do want. So they could be non-league. It's possible.
Wow, incredible. Let's talk about Novak Djokovic, shall we? And a drug test scandal.
I wouldn't say a scandal. No, he was unhappy that he was. No, that's definitely over-egging it. I shouldn't have written that down in that.
Well, that's what I've got here, Aidan, and I'm reading it to you.
I know. I'm sorry. It was my fault. So yeah, he was a bit cross that he was sampled. He was asked to provide a urine and blood sample 90 minutes before his match against Cam Norrie, and it was in the public eye over here because it was in the spotlight over here because it was against Team GB. He beat Cam Norrie, of course, but he said it's not the protocol to do that. He should have had it after the match. The testers said that there wasn't enough time after the match, and he said, well, the testing agency or the doping agency are a private organisation. They do things when they want to do it. They're not taking account of what the players need. And he said if we had our own one, which we could kind of have a bit more say over the scheduling. But nonetheless, it didn't stop him winning, and he's a hugely controversial character these days, isn't he? It's as simple as that.
He is, but you like him, don't you?
Oh, I love him. I do. I like a controversial character, you know.
You do?
That's why I like Hayley.
Whereas I like Cam Norrie.
Yeah,
I've got a soft spot for Cam.
Yeah, why not? Why not? He's good.
Very good.
He's good. We'll see what he can do this summer.
Yeah, let's keep our eyes peeled on that. Hayley, need to talk to you. The big story of the week is Girls Loud and their comeback.
I am so happy about this, Ellie.
Yes.
After 10 years, they are reuniting, obviously without Sarah, and I know that the tour that they're doing is a celebration of her life, but it's really exciting. I love it when bands get back together.
They all do, don't they?
All
Eventually.
do it. I went to see S Club. I took Mark along. He had to miss the Rugby World Cup final to come along and see S Club, but he secretly enjoyed it. And it's just great because it's the memories you get of those songs. You're like, it reminds you of your youth.
Yeah, do you know what? It's so sad that you talk about S Club, but obviously they're doing it without Paul. Yeah. And Girls Aloud doing it without Sarah. It's so bittersweet, isn't it?
It really is. And I am a massive Girls Aloud fan, and I followed their whole journey. So I do feel upset about that. And it must be very hard for the girls as well to get on stage and just be like, actually, you know, she's missing.
Yeah.
But I know that Sarah had spoken to Cheryl before she died and had said, actually, I want you girls to go ahead. So I had seen an interview where Cheryl had said that. So they obviously feel like it's the right thing to do.
And it's a huge tour now that they're embarking on.
I'm going to try and get tickets. It's May and June in England and Ireland next year. So
absolutely.
Let's go, Ellie.
Aidan, will you be going? Oh, yeah, we absolutely will. Aidan, will you be going?
If Hayley invites me, I think we'll...
You're not invited, so that's not going to happen.
Right, that's a no then.
And I think we've just got enough time to talk Christmas telly.
Yes.
What have we got coming up?
We have got Strictly Christmas Special, Christmas Day. This is important. Danny Cipriani, he's going to be on it.
Cipriani.
Is it Cipriani?
Yes.
OK.
Yeah, try with QPR.
This way you two are very useful for each other. Very
OK. Aidan's actually been helpful. Keisha from the Sugar Babes, she's going to be doing it as well.
Who?
Keisha from the Sugar Babes.
Yeah,
so
I like her.
So that's the lineup so far. So it's different celebrities for the Christmas special, which is really exciting. Gavin and Stacey, I thought there was going to be a new one.
Yeah, me too.
No.
Oh.
I looked it up last night. I couldn't see it. That's broken my heart because I am the biggest Gavin and Stacey fan.
Gavin and Facey.
I've lost my way now. And anyway, Love Actually, by the way, is returned to the cinemas.
Oh,
so
my
you can go and see
favourite
that.
film of all time. Loads to look forward to. Hayley, you've been amazing. Aidan, thank you so much. Brilliant. And thanks for joining me. Lots coming up on GB News this afternoon. Dawn Neeson is up next.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It is staying on the cold side as we move through the rest of the weekend, frost returning tonight, but we will have rain moving in from the Atlantic, and we can see that on the bigger picture. High pressure moves away as we head through into the second half of the weekend, replaced by low pressure bringing outbreaks of rain. Turning chilly this evening for many areas as skies clear, temperatures will tumble away. However, into the early hours, thicker cloud will move into the far west. Outbreaks of rain moving into parts of Northern Ireland. Some mist and fog patches ahead of the rain, and temperatures, well, towns and cities close to freezing, below freezing in the countryside. -4 or -5 Celsius is possible, but it means a sunny start with those fog patches still around first thing further north and east. Thicker cloud in the west, outbreaks of rain moving in, and this slowly pushing its way eastwards through the day. Best of the sunshine holding on across parts of Scotland, thicker cloud developing elsewhere, and the wind's just starting to increase across the far southwest as mild air approaches here, 11 or 12 Celsius, but elsewhere, cold day once more, 4 or 5 degrees at best. Into Monday, that low pressure is still around, giving outbreaks of showery rain across England and Wales in particular, some heavy bursts possible. Brighter skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but quite windy across some eastern coasts. And it stays unsettled as we move through this week with further outbreaks of rain and temperatures on the cold side.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist. And you survived? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three. Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Ah.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to